At the megachurch I worked at, we paid a consultant an enormous amount of money to help us do better at manipulating people out of their money. I'll tell you the story and the amount. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. I want to start by saying I'm deeply ashamed of this. Like, it'll keep me up at night sometimes, but I don't think my shame should stop me from letting you know what really happens. So this megachurch is like a lot of megachurches. It had experienced explosive growth and built a bunch of buildings in about 10 years time, like a multi-thousand seat sanctuary, a double gymnasium, all kinds of buildings. And they had done back-to-back capital campaigns to ask people to give sacrificially above the 10% they wanted everyone to give so that they could build all these buildings and expand the ministry. But this time it wasn't about a new building because people had stopped coming in by the droves and, our growth had plateaued and all of that. But the consultant, when they came in, they told us something interesting and deeply disturbing. They say, yes, you've done these back-to-back sacrificial giving campaigns, and what we know is that people will give more than you ask them to give for sort of the normal running of the thing when you have these campaigns. And so if you don't go back-to-back with these sacrificial giving campaigns, he said, you're leaving money on the table. We didn't have a 3D rendering of a big, beautiful building to convince people that they should give more money, that they should make personal sacrifices in order to build something. What we did have was a whole lot of debt that we had incurred over that time building all these massive buildings so that we would grow, and we had stopped growing. So what do? How do you get people to give you more money? Because people just don't want to give more money when you say, hey, we've got a lot of debt and we just need to pay more on the debt. And just to be clear, this wasn't a super wealthy area where everybody had a lot of expendable income. Of course, we had some relatively wealthy people in our church for that area, but this was by and large a group of working class people that we were trying to get more money out of. But don't worry, the consultant had a system that they said worked every single time. Now, it starts with meetings with the wealthiest people. This is pretty typical in all of these kinds of campaigns. The rich people get a personal meeting with the pastor and the consultant one-on-one. So you find out who gives the most in the church and you sit down with them one-on-one to have meetings with this consultant. I didn't get to go in those meetings. That was above my pay grade, but that was step one. And you do that ahead of time before you really launch the initial part of the campaign, because what you want is on the week after you launch, you have one of those thermometers or whatever, and you fill it a whole lot of the way up so that people can sense a momentum. They can sense that, oh wow, everybody's pitching in, when actually it ends up being just a couple of people that have given very large donations. And they do that, of course, for tax reasons and the kind of reasons that wealthy people give to nonprofits that I don't understand, because I've never been wealthy and I probably never will. And that's step one of the manipulation, this sense of momentum that we're all in this together, that everybody is sacrificing for the mission and the purpose of this church. Then you start in with the mass populace. We have a big flashy thing that we mail to people. We have some video testimonials. We develop all of that ahead of time that is going to be part of a sermon series. And this sermon series is going to use this consultant's magical metaphor, a ladder. Each rung of the ladder is a different level of giving. So the first one is like from zero giving to giving something, and then from giving something to giving a little bit more. And I don't remember all the rungs of the ladder. There was tithing at some point and sacrificial giving. And what we would talk about in the sermon series is each of those rungs each week. And we would use Bible verses and testimonials of people who gave and experienced all of the wonderful things that you experience when you give to the church. Now, this wasn't a prosperity gospel church. We didn't tell people that if they gave $10, they were going to get $100 back from God or anything like that. But it was much more of a soft manipulation. And then after we do several weeks of teaching people how God wants them to give money to the church, all of the scriptural evidence that is not really there, and all of the different tools that we use to convince people that this is an idea. You have them look at the ladder, you have them figure out which rung that they are on, and you ask them not to give sacrificially, but just to go up one rung on the ladder and become a little bit more faithful to God in your giving. And he said, what's really important is the no rung to one rung. Because if you get people to start giving, then in 6 months, you can send them a letter and ask them to give a little more. And in a year, you can send them another letter that'll ask them to give a little more. And you begin to get them warmed up to the idea that they are supposed to give their money to the church. I was really uncomfortable with all of this. I knew it was not okay. I knew that this was actual manipulation. I knew that we were going to tell people that the Bible said that they were supposed to give 10% when the Bible actually doesn't say that. I've got plenty of videos on that. And I said I didn't really want to participate. I didn't want to preach any of these sermons, but I had to preach at least one. And so I chose the one that made me the least sick in order to preach that sermon. And I shouldn't have. I should have stood up. I should have said publicly that this was manipulation, that this was not okay, that the church just needed to allow people to give to it and not continue back to back telling people that they needed to give more and more and more because they needed to sacrifice for the church. But I didn't. And I hate that. But we paid him a lot. We paid him for the one-on-one meetings, for the constant consulting and all of that. We paid him just a little bit more than $100,000. Over $100,000 of these working people's money was spent on a consultant to help us manipulate them out of more money. And that was wrong. And it happens all the time. This is a whole industry of people that are focused on helping churches do this. And it needs to stop. So, if you go to one of these churches, you should ask. You should find out. And when you find out, you should let everybody know. Because if it's not bad, if it's not evil, then it should be out in the open. Everybody in the church should know what is being paid for these people and what they are doing behind the scenes so that absolutely everybody can decide how they want to support an organization that is going to spend $100,000 to get better at manipulating them out of their money.